Drum Mechanics Podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today we'll be interviewing Scott Pellegrom. Scott is a good friend, incredible artist, incredible drummer, and a purveyor of health and fitness. If you follow Scott on any of his socials, you'll know that he loves mushrooms, eating mushrooms. You'll know he loves health and fitness, and his hands and his feet from a technical perspective are just on another level. Scott and I go through a wide array of subjects today, so please check it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for being here. Scott Pellegrom, what is going on? Everyone, welcome Drum Mechanics Podcast. Scott, super excited to have you here, man. How's your day going?
My day is going great so far. I've got Pegasus is sleeping on my left side. Phoenix is somewhere here on the ground relaxing. We just went for our second little hike for the day, and we're just doing a bunch of consultations, and I get to hang out with you now. So it's a nice, relaxed day.
That sounds like a great start. I'm also just extremely jealous you have two mythical creatures hanging around your house because I don't have that.
I'm pretty blessed. Yep. Oh, and here comes a third. Oh, here comes Zumi. She doesn't want to be left out. Yeah, that's my mom. Yeah,
your mom.
She's the last. That's my mom's pup. So she's like, when we're together, it's the four of us is the pack. But otherwise, Pegasus and Phoenix are my. I guess I consider myself their service human. That's what I call myself because I drive them to places, I prepare their meals, and I make sure that they can get out to the woods to mark their turf and get all the sniffs and smells in. So that's my job for them.
You know, dogs have it really well made because when we go to the bathroom, we don't make them clean up after us. But when they go to the bathroom, if we're in a public place, we really got to do diligence, you know?
Yeah, I know. I think when you talk about how certain species develop, the dogs, the canine, I know we had a little hand in it, but they really figured it out. Like they're not paying taxes, they're not paying for insurance, they're not paying for the car bills or anything, but they're always there. They're always going on the car ride. They're always getting great food, hanging out on vacation, snoring right now while it takes a little nap on my lap. They figured it out.
They've got the entouraging down like perfectly.
Yes.
So Scott, I'm really excited for your time. Truthfully, I've been a fan of yours for a very long time. In fact, when you were with Dream Cymbals, you got me excited about Dream Cymbals. And I think I've told you this offline, but I lived in Wuhan, China for 6 months, and I went and visited the Wuhan factory. And they will not like this, but they sold me a profound amount of Dream Cymbals without markings on them. So I've got a really great collection, and that was really cool. And then seeing you transition and moving in the world and evolving, building relationships with new companies has gotten me very excited. And then truthfully, when we started connecting one-on-one, realizing not only are you an incredible drummer, but your health advocacy, the way you think about mental health, physical health, we have a lot of synergistic thoughts there. And so just diving right into this today, I mean, I'm just wondering, could you speak to how you became this person who is health conscious, thinking about body and mind, lateral to drumming?
It's kind of funny because I've been on both sides of the coin, so to speak, with health and wellness. I think it's always kind of been there, lingering a bit of how I was raised, like the youngest of five, and I was still growing up on a farm. So like my parents grew a lot of vegetables and we outsourced a lot of our food to the surrounding farms. And then like I remember like getting older and it was like, everyone had air conditioning and cable TV and everyone was like eating Domino's pizza and stuff. And I was like, is that like the cool thing to do? And I'm used to running around barefoot, playing with animals, hiking in the woods and, digging for my own potatoes and making salads by picking it out of the garden. But like, spirituality, mindfulness, things like that. I was really, really curious, like off the bat as a young kid. And I started reading about like Taoism, the Hinduism, Buddhism, anything that I could get my hands on that just had a different perspective on how we are as humans and maybe what our journey is like or how to cope with our journey sometimes. And it's kind of funny because there were certain aspects where I really loved cooking and I guess I've always kind of been obsessed with different types of diets. And it was funny because for a while when I was vegetarian, I wasn't necessarily that healthy, but I was proud of the label of being vegetarian. But then as things moved on and I started to get older and I was traveling, touring, I'm kind of just giving a crash course here, but like I wasn't super healthy all the time because I was like at times self-medicating, like being a ADHD human. which I think is a blessing for the world of creativity. And when you're focused on something you love, you're hyper focused. But there's also times where, yeah, I don't want to go and do the emails. I don't want to do the paperwork. There's things like that that I don't love. I self medicated a lot with tons of coffee, lots of sugar. And I used to use tobacco. I actually used to smoke a lot of cigarettes. And that was like, as bad as I knew it was, if I was like smoking a cigarette, I was doing the phone calls, the emails, the paperwork that I didn't like to do. The more I started traveling and touring and going overseas, I started to see all these different lives, these different religions, these different diets that I had been studying and curious about. And what I had noticed, the people that were really happy, feeling good, especially in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and more, who were still doing what they love to do, whether they're a musician or a doctor or a stay at home parent, is that they took care of themselves. And they did that through diet. They did that through a bit of routine. They did that from exercise and also like creating a life that they wanted to live. So, with all that being said, like now that I've been able to be home for a couple of years and not always be on the road, I love sleep. I love exercise. I love making sure I get one, if not two hikes a day with my pups, barefoot through the woods, through the dunes here on Lake Michigan. And I very rarely go out to eat unless I know one, it's the best foodie experience of my life, or I know the restaurant is super, super clean eats. So I went from someone who would drink tons of coffee and smoke cigarettes and eat tons of chocolate and Sour Patch Kids at times to like I have sea moss every morning that I have to have. I'm taking my electrolytes. I'm taking my multivitamins. Um, I literally have it down to my diet of like, I know exactly what I will eat and how I will eat it. So that's kind of like where I'm at today. And it's incorporating all forms of diet. I like a full spectrum diet of understanding the carnivore diet, the vegan diet, the vegetarian diet, and pescatarian, you name it, but finding the cleanest, healthiest sources. So I'm able to eat those whether I'm home on tour through the Midwest or if I'm overseas, I can keep my eyes and ears open for that type of food. Since I made this change, it's affected my life in only the most positive ways possible, and it seems to anyone that's around me, especially studying or anyone I'm mentoring, coaching, they're like getting on this path. And I'm trying to get people on the path a lot sooner. Like if they're 16 or if they're 26, like, yo, if you're going to be playing for the rest of your life, now is the time to take care of yourself.
Scott, that's all amazing. The question I ask though, because all that, I mean, the journey, it's a big journey. Like as a career fitness professional, you can go deep, very, very far. For you, what was the experience that made you go, okay, listen, I need to rethink how I'm doing things? Because truthfully, what you're talking about, the smoking, the coffee, the poor dieting, that's not uncommon for drummers, right? Anyone that's an and professional drummers usually get it better, but like the amateur drummer who does not have a ton of money, they're playing 3 hour shows every single night. They just got to get whatever they can into their system. What did you feel that made you go, I've got to make a change here?
It wasn't even just a feeling because I wasn't aware of how I felt. Like I knew I felt a certain way, or at times I would always have a headache, or I'd be a little achy, or sometimes I had a lot of energy and sometimes I didn't. It was like that moment when I started saying, there's kind of two scenarios, but the most recent was during 2020 and 2021 when there was not a lot of traveling happening. I really, that was a huge part of my life. So totally reevaluated my life because there was like, what else am I going to do? And I started thinking about how am I living my life? How am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of myself? And I wasn't necessarily, you know? And then it started to reflect like, oh, this could be why I have some joint pains and joint problems. This might be why I get fatigued because I do a lot of jobbing work where I'm doing 3 or 4 sets of music. And then like by second set, I'm getting fatigued.
Right.
Right. And I realized one, I just didn't know how to hydrate myself and I wasn't hydrated and I wasn't hydrating myself. Like it was like back to back. That was the first step, was like, I'm not hydrating. And when I started focusing on that, I started, a lot of my pains and aches and certain things went away. So I'd say that was kind of a combination. I know there was another thing that was coming about, but I would say the hydration was the biggest thing for me, which sounds maybe like small to certain people, but holy cow, there's so many ways that we think we're hydrating because we're thirsty, but we're actually not taking care of the minerals that we need, the electrolytes that we need. So that was kind of my first big awakening, um, just in reflection of my whole life as I sat in my backyard in a garden of like 2020 trying to figure out what's going to happen.
I have been a healthy person, so to speak, for as long as I've been an adult. And the thing that I'd say that I've discovered is every time you think you're good, you learn a small new thing that you're like, oh, I wasn't drinking enough water, or I wasn't sleeping enough, or I was having this food that was making me feel bad. And when you have the fog removed, right, you have this heavy fatigue on you all the time, but you're not really aware of it. And then you drink a bunch more water one day and you're like, why do I feel so awake today? And then you don't have the water the next day and you feel foggy again. You get this A B comparison that becomes all of a sudden extremely obvious of like, wait a second, I like that good feeling. I don't want to feel that heavy fog. So if you had a young drummer come to you, even an advanced pro drummer, they're like, Scott, listen, I know you're very healthy. Would you say hydration and water, in your opinion, is the easiest place for someone to start into this world, getting healthier?
Yeah, and being aware of, this is kind of getting, real picky, is like the type of water you're drinking will create the effect you're going for. So there'll be a difference of distilled water versus a spring water versus like the purest, most beautiful water you can get that's full of minerals, because a lot of us are mineral deficient. That's one of the biggest things. And if you're just slamming back a bunch of, like, let's say, just bottled distilled water, you might be cleansing your body or flushing your body maybe of toxins or things you don't need, which is good. But then you also need to hydrate, like using Celtic sea salts or Baja Gold type of salt, right? So being aware of the type of waters you're drinking is really important too, because you need to get that in, into your tissues, not just flushing through your body. But that's a huge start, because how many of us are drinking coffee throughout the day, or slamming Red Bulls, Monsters, just to keep things going? Some people, will drink a lot of sodas, and it might feel good in the moment or think it's refreshing you, but you're depleting yourself. So instead of like grabbing the Red Bull or having that extra coffee before your gig, you should be drinking your water, and mineral waters, especially like Mountain Valley is one that, if I'm not mistaken, is a great spring water in a glass bottle you can get, that's amazing.
That's fantastic. Honestly, I'm glad you're sharing this, Scott. I mean, honestly, coming up, anyone's listening to this, I have several nutritionists, Ellen Aragon. I'm working on Dan Garner, and another guy named Brad Dieter, who's a super nutritionist, all PhD or high level folks. And I want to dive deep into that chemical world because, truthfully, it's a funny thing, Scott, because if you think about food going into your body and like water and all that stuff, I mean, we don't, like, brownies go in, broccoli goes in, but if we actually like look back and we go, okay, these are just chemicals, and these chemicals inside our body have specific outcomes that happen. And do I want to have the man-made brownie chemical fueling my exercise session, fueling my drumming, whatever it is, versus something that's healthier? And so I love that you're sharing all this. If we shift gears and we talk about more the body end, I know that you do think about the body a lot, and I really want to explore because there's a lot of different facets here. We sidestep the nutrition for a moment. You're someone that is pretty well known for technique. In fact, even today, someone's like, "Can you tell me about the slide technique?" I'm like, I'm not the guy. And I always defer back to you, not necessarily if I understand your philosophy, because you're the guy for every single specific technique, but you have some really unique philosophies around using your hands and your feet on the drum set that really is, I would say, almost liberating, because it sounds like it's not about French grip. It's not just about German grip. It really is about learning how to use your hands. I wonder, would you be open to speaking a little bit more about that?
It's great. I was just filming some lessons just a few days ago, really starting to deep dive into this and giving crash course. And I guess this is the way I'll put it. Anyone out there, I think you should be aware of, just like you need to know your rudiments or the basic of how to count off a song or that there are different time signatures, you should be aware of the different types of techniques that are out there for drum set, marching, snare drum, playing marimbas, because it's just our vocabulary that we need to know. Like you said, French grip, German grip, or American grip. But the thing is, and this is what I like to talk about, is that my mentor and one of my favorite humans ever is Don Lombardi. And if those of you who know him because he's just done so much in the world. But the last like 5 to 6 years, he's been mentoring me, and I've been studying through his eyes and his experience, because he's been around all of the best drummers that we can imagine for so long, and he's documented this. He's documented their lessons, their philosophies, and the thing that seemed to be the most common with people who have extraordinary technique is that they use the body's natural motions. And what I mean is, a lot of people will talk about, okay, here's German grip and in your right hand, and here's traditional grip in your left hand, and here's a fulcrum point you need to squeeze down on, and this is the result we want, a like academia result, like you're going to be graded on how your sticks look going up and down. With that being said, like, our body is not full of straight lines. Nature is not full of straight lines. We are not a machine that can just be replaced or repaired by going up and down. Our body naturally has curves. Our body naturally will swoop from side to side, like the swipe technique, the slide technique, or I call the sideways molar. Like, our hand moves that way. When you're kind of cocking back just your wrist, and lifting it back towards you, like, that's almost more awkward than doing this. Like, you can do this all day. You can like flop your wrist around all day. You can turn like you're moving the doorknob. Um, all that stuff is super natural. But when you start adding like just these basic motions, and then you do that over and over and over, like, you can develop problems. And then if you add like problems as in tendonitis, carpal tunnel, lots of blisters, because you're just trying to do the same repetitive motion up and down as if you're a machine. So for me, when I started messing around with all the different angles, and I started doing this at a young age, but it didn't click until Don said, look at how you make a fist. And he had me just my arm hanging parallel and just make a nice relaxed fist. And once I started seeing how that moved, it really started to click. Like, oh, that's open close technique, that's molar technique, that's wrist control, that's finger control, that's allowing your body to work kind of anti-gravity and allowing the stick to work with gravity. And then the light bulb went on, and my brain kind of said, hey, wait a minute, so if we naturally make a fist and we naturally can turn these ways with all these beautiful curves, that means that the hand is a house, and the house has many rooms, and the house has hallways that go to those rooms. And depending on what the stick needs, it can get to that room. So now you're not just stuck on having to hold a stick a certain way. And if you lose that hold, the world's over. It means that depending on how your body is, depending on what instrument you're playing on, hi-hat, snare drum, ride cymbal, floor tom, bottom of the drum, whatever you want, now the stick can move to any room or hallway, and it'll still function, and it'll function with its dynamics, with its speed, with its power, using your body's natural motions. So I know that's kind of I like to talk a lot, apparently, because we're talking about drums here, but like, the moment you're aware of how your body moves and how your body moves naturally, um, the game changes. Because you're not just working to a metronome trying to go from 100 BPM to 110 to 120 with your single strokes. It's like you are using your body the most natural way possible, allowing to more so work away from the drums and use your anti-gravity for how your body can bring the stick away from the drum, and then allowing your body and the stick to have its beautiful dance with the natural laws of gravity. Once that clicks, the game changes immensely.
It's funny you say all that. I love. So I don't know. Maybe it's just from my biomechanics background, but I don't know what it is. Drummers, hockey players, fitness people, anyone that uses their body, there seems to be this inherent mechanical restriction that people impose on people to try and enforce a very specific external observation, right? Like when you do a golf swing, I want the golf swing to move through this exact motion in this circular path, and every single person has to do it the exact same thing. You're a drummer. If you're in a drum line, that's one thing. But if you're just your own drummer, right, we need the sticks to go from 0 degrees to 90 degrees exactly like this, and it cannot deviate from that path. And if you think, you don't have to look hard. If you look into mechanics of anatomy, biomechanics, and there's something called orthokinematic interdependencies. Forgetting about the words, when I move and lift my arm up, many joints move concurrently, from rib cage opening, shoulder blade going up, glenohumeral joint moves. Like everything moves in this one harmonious motion. And then you go, hey, okay, I want you to reach up, but now lock that shoulder blade down. Don't lose the shoulder blade. You need to have good posture, and then reach up overhead. And it feels terrible because you've taken away one of the joint systems. But in drumming and in mechanical arts, we do this all the time, like you're saying. And I see it a lot with drum technique. I think the most beautiful thing that you said is it seems like when you stop thinking about the restrictions and forcing yourself to look a certain way, and you understand, like you can study advanced anatomy like I have, but all you'll come back down to is that the body moves in a very natural way specific to the individual. And if you get out of the way of it, it can really do some amazing things.
100%. 100%. And it's even with anyone that I'm fortunate to work with, we do a lot of time of just analyzing our body, like even sitting back, because a lot of people think about molar technique. Let's just say we talk molar technique. And by the way, you made a great point. Like certain styles of music, like drumline, you have certain techniques to get certain results and for uniformity, because that's the genre, that's the approach of that music. Now you're talking about playing a drum kit in a rock band, a funk band, a jazz band, gigging every night, practicing, rehearsing, recording, you're jobbing, you're with your original band. That's a lot of different things happening there. And you're playing in a club to a microbrewery to maybe you're jamming at a street to an outdoor music festival. That's a lot of stuff that's going on. And that means you need to have a lot more tools in the toolbox to get the job done when needed. Not that you need to always use those tools. You just need to know that they're there and how to recall them, where to find them. So, for example, a lot of people, when they talk about molar technique, they immediately start going into the arm stuff, or they talk about moving the wrist. But what's really happening to me, one, part of molar is an action and reaction. So if you make a stroke and then allow the stroke to happen, you can get multiple strokes. You get an extra note, maybe 2 or 3. That's one way to look at it. Just like if I am holding onto a basketball and I just drop it, it's going to hit and go until it stops. And then when you get aware of that with your body, with a drumstick, you move slightly ahead before the stick dies. Now it continues the motion. People get really caught up, though, in the movements versus why are we making those movements. If I'm sitting here and I want some power and endurance from the wrist only has so much room to move. So if I lift from my elbow and then come up and fall down, and I'm aware of how that happens, I make people smack their legs a lot, is that string, if I imagine the string coming from the elbow, that happens, and what's going on with my shoulder. And then when I drop that elbow, the wrist naturally falls, and it falls more of like a karate chop, backhand, and the stick goes and then to the head. Not this pumping and trying to make everything look perfect. It's about, I kind of imagine I'm pumping air when I'm using, molar. I'm going to fly away. It looks really goofy. It's not about how perfect it looks. It's about how your body moves when you're going to lift from the elbow versus trying to lift and go all the way up to a shoulder stroke, which is really loud but super slow, the elephant trunk, to just pumping the wrist a little bit, right? So being aware of how your body moves, and just even if you're in front of a mirror, seeing what is most comfortable versus like the most uncomfortable position for me is just doing these type of strokes.
Right.
Just like they're conventional, this is how to hold a stick and move back and put the stick down. Like I don't even move that way very often.
Right. You said something though with the marching drumming thing, and you said that the visual standards are there because of the music, and I would almost want to contradict and say like the movements that they exhibit are from military standards from many, many, many years prior for visual, right? They want everyone to look the same. But as you and I know, they could all look different and sound exactly the same, right? It's for visual uniformity as far as how the military wanted it years ago. And a lot of our drumming forefathers playing traditional grip come from that as well too, where they learned original, like you go back to Vic Firth and guys prior, they learned marching techniques from that same military-esque standard. And so it brings up a really interesting divide that I know you're going towards this direction, but the performance aspect versus, the art and sound versus how it looks. Because there's a lot of people who will go, I want to look this way, which turns into drum ergonomics and how they move their body. Like, I need to look like Travis Barker. I need to have flat cymbals, sure. And then there's, well, what is required for my body to make the sounds that I want the safest and most efficient way possible, which is cool. Because if we have that divide, we understand that there's performance elements, like when you see Art Cruz of Lamb of God throwing his arm as hard as he can, right? There's elements of performance there, but not necessary for necessarily performing. But then you think about the body side of it like you are, you don't have the economy of motion. You don't have to work that hard to make those same sounds happen, especially if we get away from this is how I have to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it, though. I love it, man. So, and you're recording some stuff on Technique, is that right?
Yeah, I'm kind of taking my life's study this far of everything I discovered on my own and everything that's been, passed down to me, and a lot of the stuff that I've really been diving into deeply with Don, because it's, my goal was like, I want to be 80, 90 years old and playing my ass off.
Yeah.
And I want to, and I can't force whatever my body is like then is how I'm going to be playing. And I need to keep being aware of my body every day. And when it clicked that, hey, I devoted some 10,000 hours on wrist control, finger control, playing on pillows, playing upside down, literally drumming in water to build all the muscles to be as fast and as powerful as I possibly could. And then starting to move into the molar natural motion, open, close, and literally doing the techniques on how my body does them, my whole playing has changed. Like, I play way faster than I think I ever had with little to no energy.
That's amazing.
Almost. I haven't had blisters in probably 10 years or more. Almost never have any pain in my body unless it's like I was headbanging because the show was really rocking, or I ended up, sitting goofy because it was a backline kit, like, things like that, where it's just, it wasn't my gear or whatever it was. But like, if I'm playing, whether it's 60 minutes or it's like 5 hours, I don't get done and feel burnt out or fatigued.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a very powerful achievement. I mean, and then the intensity and speed in which you play, the visual intensity you play, it seems like you'd be exhausted after, but you're just showing that you've developed yourself so well.
Yeah, and it keeps getting better and better because the light bulb clicks. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Wow. Especially with the open close stuff. That's kind of where my head has been. People call it push pull, open close. I only argue the push pull, like if you just look up the definition of pushing and pulling, that's not really what's happening in your hands versus where you literally are opening and closing your hands just into, is it a very opening your hand all the way or just opening your hand a little bit? Right? Yeah. And I really feel everything falls into there, and that's under the umbrella of molar technique, because you either throwing your hands open for an open wrist stroke or to use your fingers or to continue motion, or you're playing closed. And that's more of like a staccato sound.
Yeah. So this brings up another idea then, because I love this, and I'm so grateful for all your wisdom. This is amazing. You're talking about the hands. I know that you are a bit of a barefoot fanatic, as I am, and I know that we both like these friendly, crazy shoes and things like that.
100%, 110%.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, could you kind of speak to the same kind of wisdom you are with the hands, with your opinion of foot technique before we get into foot health?
100%. Well, this is kind of the way I look at it too. And if anyone out there listening knows anything about my playing, something that I really love is single pedal playing. I've always kind of been that way, and I was inspired by Dorico Watson, my mentor, and I think still one of the greatest drummers today. He has literally one of the best single pedal foot techniques out there. If you don't know who Dorico Watson is, look him up, because if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would have even attempted the whole single pedal path. Um, this is something I bring up about foot technique, whether you're double pedal or single pedal, is that it's not just about your feet and the natural motions of your body. And I'm saying, like, literally, I know a lot of players out there use their toes inside of their shoes, and they don't know if that's okay or not. It is okay, because your toes are going to wiggle and move and add momentum. But the thing you need to question off the bat is not even the technique or your feet, it's what we're using. The foot pedal was designed during a certain era, right? As it evolved too, but it's about the footwear that we were wearing that helped influence the design of the pedal. Does that make sense?
100%.
So we have a heel plate on the bass drum pedal, but how many of us wear heels? If you're wearing heels, man or a woman, right? Dress shoes heels have like a half an inch to an inch on them. So if you were wearing those on the heel plate, you're at heel down. But if you took away that heel and look where that space would be, you're what? Heel up.
Right. Yep.
So if you're wearing heels and you're playing heel down, quote unquote, you're actually at a heel up position for your leg and your ankle and all that stuff. So if you're not, wearing heels, you're wearing your regular shoes, even if there is a little bit of, a couple centimeters here and there, you're actually at what I would consider a resting position. A complete heel down would be a resting position and a way to feather the bass drum, and you can obviously work it up from there. But that's why you'll see, I might be wrong, but I believe it's Colin Bailey, phenomenal foot control. He uses a lot of the times the pedal that doesn't have the heel plate. I cannot think of what that's called right now, but that allows like the hanging of the heel with that pedal.
Interesting.
Now you're getting a lot of different swinging motion underneath and above that bass drum pedal.
I have my grandfather, my late grandfather passed, and he left me 3 drum items. Well, several, but one of the first Slingerland snare drums ever made in the 1920s, which is crazy. It's an artifact on my shelf. Yeah, I'll show you. I'll send you a picture of it later. It is crazy. It was covered in all like lacquer paint. It was disgusting. And I thought it was trash. I showed it to my buddy, and he goes, "No, no, no, no." He cleaned it up. Looks amazing. 25 3/4 of an inch Pioneer bass drum, Ludwig. And then one of the Ludwig bass drum pedal, not the Speed King, I forget the name of it now, but it was the one with the red bottom on it, like a kind of Ferrari red. But the reason why I bring that up is because where the axis is for the heel, you have the foot plate, and then the actual footboard extends longer on the other side. So the springboard was so low that when you would apply the bass drum, like you'd push down, heel down, you had to push your heel down to have it come back up. So it was very much like that duelist pedal, but it's got like an extra 2-inch hang, so you have to use your foot both ways. But I absolutely love the experience. Like, it feels so good. Like, I can play quick doubles on and do all the right stuff with almost no spring tension because I just got to get my heel down a little. It's a lot of fun. But the idea you bring up with the heels, it's a very different thing. What are your thoughts? I mean, so what I was holding up earlier for people who are listening to the actual podcast is I've got these shoes that have toes in them. And these are called the Vibram 5 Fingers, and Scott and I are both proponent of minimalist footwear, so shoes that kind of get out of the way of your foot and allow your natural kinematics. Scott, what is your opinion of in what drummers should be doing versus, wearing a minimalist shoe versus wearing like a rock hard boot like we've seen some of these classical metal double bass guys wearing?
Well, you always find with me is that I'll have 2 answers because, if you want to run a straight line, I'm going to tell you to run up a dune. So the way I practice and developed, especially when I was in like my shedding years, like I'm not in the time where I'm practicing, 8 hours a day, let alone 3 hours a day. But when I literally like in my practice space, I had a lot of my different shoes, and I would wear my winter boots. I would go barefoot. I'd wear my flip flops. I would go with my socks. I would use running shoes. Like I would change the medium every time I would practice, or even within like, 20, 30-minute spurts, just so I was always mentally like, no matter what happens when I sit down to play, if I'm sitting in on a gig or it's a backline kit or something goes wrong, I'm good to go. Like the moment I'm behind a drum kit, I know what to do, right? It's just like being thrown on stage and just being able to go. Um, what it's going to come down to, though, like certain people, if you're going to be doing a lot of high BPM double pedal stuff, like Alex Cohen is always someone to just go to when it's coming to double pedal and balance and technique. He's amazing. And his viewpoint will be a little bit different than mine, but I like the freedom of the feet to be able to engage because my toes help with my foot technique. I don't let them just sleep on the job. Like if you were to see my toes, they're going to move a lot like my fingers are.
Yeah.
Inside of my shoe, or that's why I like flip flops too. And people always wonder why are you drumming flip flops? And it's like it's so easy to do that because my feet are free to move around, and the flip flop is just protecting them from getting hurt. I'm not super comfortable playing in socks, but the results I get when using socks on certain pedals are awesome.
Yeah.
But most of the pedals out there are built with grip and to keep you locked in a place, which is great for certain things, right? Single pedal stuff or blast beats. You want to probably keep that stuff locked in so you're just clean and consistent. But
Yeah.
I, with developing and practicing, was like, I want my feet to be able to converse with my hands, and my hands have ghost notes. They have flams. They have diddles. They crescendo and decrescendo flawlessly, or almost flawlessly. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Naturally should be the word I should say. And I wanted my feet to do that. So allowing my feet to fully engage and not say, no toes, you can't work. You just got to stay still. Just like a locked, weird traditional grip where your pinky's tucked in and you're doing all the stuff to create tension. No, I want my feet to be free. So those the Vibram shoes are great. If I'm going to be doing a lot of pedal work, I have a pair of Asics that are like 15 years old, and there's no traction. Like they are death. Yeah, I do not walk in these things because they are so slick. But if I'm going to be out night after night doing like a clinic run for 7 nights, I'm going to have those shoes with me because they're super thin. They fit like a glove. And they're the best fitting shoes I've ever had, other than the 5-finger ones, because those literally, when I put them on, are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, they feel great.
So that's a big part of it, is the feet having freedom to move and engage. Those toes are important.
There's two things, and one, I want to agree with you, and then I want to tell you a story that you might find interesting, which is from a neuroscience side of things. You talked about this earlier, right? So I find it intriguing to me that drummers want to work on hand technique, but don't want to work on their foot development. Because if we think about your hand and you grab a drumstick and I super glued everything in place and you could only move at the wrist, right? We already talked that that's a crazy idea and how we're limiting that is because how many joints that we're not moving. Well, when you wear a shoe that's super restricted, you literally only using the talocrural joint, like your ankle joint, one joint of 55 sliding joints down there, which is bonkers to me purely from a mechanics perspective. Like you're telling me you have 54 other joints that you're not allowing to move in harmony to help you orchestrate things. Like that's just so limiting. One of the guests that's going to be on this podcast is a friend of mine who's a neurophysiology student. And one of the things he had to study, and I think you'll love this, this is terrible but awesome. Decades ago, they did a terrible experiment that you can't do anymore where they took a monkey and they sewed the monkey's 2 fingers together, their 4th and 5th fingers. And they assessed in the motor cortex how the brain was interpreting each finger. So they could see when they would move the 4th and 5th finger, they could see each part of the motor cortex light up and where it was. When they sewed the fingers together, they left it like that for 3 or 4 months, and they started to see that the monkey started to de-differentiate between the 2 fingers. There was no longer a 4th and 5th space in the motor cortex. It was actually one area. And so it was gone. It was just like, this is my motor cortex in my the motor unit in my motor cortex. So when they removed the sutures and the fingers were separated again, The monkey did not recognize the two fingers. After the sutures were gone, it still recognized them as one finger. And it took nearly 6 months for the monkey to recognize in the brain, also as an individual, that these fingers were independent things. That was in 3 months in a monkey. So for us humans over the age of 20 and 30, when we wear footwear that is like so limiting and hamstringing for our 5 toes, you have to imagine how disconnected that is from our actual motor cortex in our brain. And so I rant this small thing because I think as drummers, of all people, we have like the best opportunity to constantly work out our feet and keep them healthy more than other musicians because we're playing the bass drum and the hi-hat. We could literally be having healthier feet than everyone else because we could be using it in a footboard in a controlled setting with less resistance. Why not? Why not?
It's funny because I always, when I'm talking to people, my clients and I'm working with them, like, let's work on those monkey toes.
Yeah.
Let's be able to dig those toes into the dirt. I have a dear friend that's a ballet dancer, and like her body is like it's her instrument, right? And the body, she is so aware of every freaking muscle that she gave me a lot of like unique ways to think about my body that I had not thought about before. Because when we are drumming, we are dancing. We just happen to be making sound with it too. And if we are naturally using our body the way we'd want to dance, we're going to sound better, feel better, and our body's going to be happier. And yeah, it's like we don't wear really tight mittens on our hands all day. And I bet you if we did, we would start thinking and moving differently. And the moment you get your shoes off, whether you want to go fully barefoot or do the 5-finger shoes or you're in some socks or whatever, like you get aware of all the muscles that you're not using, the joints you're not using. And you could take every moment that you're walking or hiking or running and walking and running in different ways, from your heel to your toe, from your toe to your heel, all toe, lifting up. And now you're engaging like the full spectrum of usage of your foot. And it's going to help your technique, and it's going to help your foundation. It's going to help your posture. It's going to help everything. And I have a lot of people now that are going barefoot for part of their day or around their house or doing their exercises and getting up on their feet. I can get like on my toes barefoot now, no problem, and walk around. And, I shattered my ankle in 2019.
Just going to ask you that.
Yeah, and a huge part of my both physical therapists I was with is everything I did, everything around the house, every little thing I did was like be barefoot as much as possible. And it wasn't just for my right ankle. It was a few months until I could even be on my ankle using crutches or anything. But even with the crutches, they were like, this will develop awesome for your right side, and then your left side is going to be really happy that you allowed it to do the same thing. And that changed my life, like shattering my ankle, my favorite right ankle with the single pedal technique, then being in a cast and not used for 2.5 months, and seeing my right calf completely turn into just nothing. And it totally changed my life. And then the best part about it is I had brought in a bass drum pedal, showed videos of how I played to my surgeon, doctor, and physical therapist, and they were like, oh, this would be the perfect way to rehabilitate your ankle. So part of my physical therapy, when I was able to use my ankle again and have any type of force, any type of pressure, any weight on it, was barefoot exercises and work with and without the crutch, and then playing the bass drum.
That brings up a really interesting tangent, and thank you so much for sharing that. I have a philosophy around this that I've been teaching with some people I've been working with. What is your opinion of using the drum set in 2 ways? Creating art, and then also using it as a physical body development tool?
1 trillion gazillion %. Literally, how many things are out there where your mind and body, your breath, 4 limbs, the mind and the mouth being the 5th limb, are working? Like go play some Foo Fighters tunes and tell me you're not exhausted by the end of it.
Right. I love
I
it.
think it's an awesome way to work out.
I've been trying to get some of these. I'm really lucky to work with some amazing drummers, like high level guys. And I've had some of them as workouts, very basic, just as an example. Have them play literally single strike unisons between right hand, right foot, left hand, left foot. So literally, quote unquote, double bass in hands, but right everything, right foot, right hand, right foot, left, and just try and hang out there at 120 BPM for like 5 minutes and move around the drum set and just don't stop. And it's very interesting to hear how this very mechanical exercise, which you could call a very simple version of Thomas Lang-esque stuff, really exposes weaknesses in people. So let alone an ankle break, you're like, it was all good, I felt fine, but then my left thumb right here got really tired. And you go, okay, great. Now we've done an assessment, and now we know where you need to start focusing so you can start to improve.
It's amazing because I remember, like I was saying, back in my shedding days and from the teens, but especially like 20 to 26, I was so obsessed with just trying to be as fast and as clean as possible. I always had a notepad, and I did a lot of the workout aspect of like, I see you doing it too, like when you're talking about body mechanics and like just using a triplet exercise, moving that around the drum kit
Yeah.
and doing all of that. I mean, even right now, my heart starts going thinking
Yeah.
about that. And like you do that for 5 minutes and try to keep it clean and try to keep it even and really stretch and be exact. Like there is so much focus and discipline in that. Um, it's amazing. And for people who are like, well, I don't want to get into running or lifting weights yet, it's like, well, if you're already drumming and you're trying to keep yourself tuned, let's talk a little bit about hydration, a little bit more about what we're putting in our body diet wise, and let's just do a little bit more of this exercise. Because what do we call most of the stuff we're doing with our warm-ups
Yeah.
or things that we're learning, or we talk about warming up and exercises.
Yeah.
So getting that into your head, I mean, look at someone like Thomas Lang.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Athletically, there's a component of physicality you have to, yeah, it's insane.
If you're not in shape, you're not doing that stuff, especially for 90 minutes straight.
Well, listen, I am in shape. I focus a lot on that. And I still watch, there's one video of him relatively recent where he plays a 30-minute drum solo, like nonstop with all of his stuff. No breaks, no mistakes. And I look at it and I go, man, like I go for a 30-minute run and I'm dying. I couldn't imagine playing 180 to 200 BPM for 30 minutes straight nonstop with all the stuff he does. Like, I mean, with so much respect to him, I know some people are not, they find him more technical than musical, but I think that there's a beauty in what he's developed that we should all look at and go, okay, what can I extrapolate from that to help me in my playing?
He's still to this day, I think one of the most amazing drummers out there. He has all of it. He can entertain, he can educate, he can perform. If you've heard any of the recordings he's done, or like his first record, which is hard to get your hands on, but if you know it, holy cow! And this is an older record. This is like from the '90s. That right there, when I heard that, a friend of mine that I toured with out of Austria, Bernhard Lackner, a great bassist, gave me the record. And he's like, "Have you ever heard Thomas's Lang like first record?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know I knew he's on a ton of them. I know his DVDs and all the stuff he's done." And that record is smoking. Holy cow! Talented, but it's like his thing is like, this is what I've developed. You know, this is the Thomas Lang thing behind the drum kit, and that's his artistry and musicality too. But he could back up any pop artist. He can back up, you know, the guy crushes it. But he was like the first person I saw. I'm like, he's in shape. He has muscles. He can play. He's the druminator. You know, like he can just play.
Yeah.
Forever. And the level never dips. It only, like, as he goes, it just seems to get more and more intense. That's just hard. It's like you said, whether you're jogging or trying to, you know, do like a 5 mile, 6 mile run, he can do that. No problem behind the kit.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, listen, this has all been extremely insightful, and I appreciate all the different facets we've been able to jump around. If I asked you kind of like one last kind of closing question, when you think about the longevity of a drummer, because you said at one point in this episode, you want to be playing drums till you're 100 years old. If you imparted one piece of wisdom to the drumming community at all, to help support them playing a very very strong, healthy, young playing career until they were up to 80, 90, and 100? What would you recommend?
That's a tough question. I think the biggest thing that I guess the way I could answer this with giving multiple answers is that you just always need to be a sponge, right? If you're a sponge, you're always going to grow as a person, as a musician. Your technique will always grow, your vocabulary will always grow. And if you're a sponge, you're always going to be absorbing all the inspiration and the knowledge that you need, even if you're not aware of it at times. That's why it's important to go to shows, go to clinics, get lessons from anyone in person or online. Always pick up a book, even if you don't finish it, thumb through it, because that's going to keep your curiosity going. Because this isn't just like, oh man, I'm 20 years old and I'm the best I can be. We're here to be a musician and to share our art. And being a musician, you are able to travel within your community, your state, or your country, different regions, different countries. Being a musician, you learn to break bread with many different types of cultures and different types of people. So there's a bigger picture than just, paradiddles and backbeats. Like when you're developing, I'll say there's music for a living, which a lot of people want to try and do or aspire to do, but there's music for a life. Music for a life is something that will last obviously your whole life, but it will create so many unique opportunities that if you had given up the instrument or given up your love or passion for any instrument, no matter who you are, uh, you just wouldn't get those experiences then. I mean, look, you and I didn't stop playing drums, and we're having this conversation, and we've become really good friends because of our love for the instrument,
Yeah.
and we have so much to share. So that's the big thing about, if we're speaking to drummers specifically, is like there's so much more than just the exercises or the warm ups or how fast or how groovy you are. Like this is a thing where it will last the rest of your life and create opportunities and magical moments that you'll have memories. So while you're still playing in your 80s, 90s, or 100s, you can sit on the porch on the rocking chair and talk to all the younger drummers and tell them stories. You know, you will be able to have stories for the rest of your life if you don't give up this instrument. And I think that is even bigger than your speed or anything else behind the kit.
There are several studies showing that for people who live to be over 100 years old, one of the main factors is their social structure. And I think everything you're saying just kind of shows that there's multiple facets of social structure available to us because of the things that we do. So I love that, man. Thank you so much. And Scott, really, I value your time. I know you're a busy guy. You're high in demand all over the place between your mentoring, your teaching, your product developments, and the people you work with. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and sharing all of this wisdom around health and fitness and drumming. It was very insightful.
Hey, appreciate it. And have me back anytime. I'd love to come back. I'm going to be following this big time. You're my guy. You're one of my go-tos that I've been learning so much from. So I appreciate you and also your time and the opportunity.
Awesome. Hey, everyone, listen, comment below. Do you want Scott to come back? All right, Scott, man. Have a great day.
All right. Take care.